Good evening and welcome to Dark Hour Paranormal. I am your host, Michael Roser, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome back a long-awaited guest, and I say that because of all of your inquiry into when we would talk again. I have the infamous Jared Murphy back tonight to discuss the Hollow Earth, the Hollow Moon theories, and perhaps diving into levels of consciousness in respect to ancient tribes and cultures around the world. Folks, I want to thank you for tuning in tonight. It's going to be one hell of a show, and I know that you guys enjoyed the last one, so hang on to your hats. Oh, man. This is great. This is fantastic. I really enjoy repeat guests. There's a reason that they're coming back and talking with us. And I kid you not, I have had so many people ask me when Jared Murphy was coming back on the show that, I could fill up an entire email inbox with just those emails and text messages I've gotten. So I'm very excited once again to have Jared Murphy back on. And as I say here, without further ado, I will bring him on and we will get right into the discussion. Here we go, folks. Let's give Jared Murphy another warm welcome back to Dark Hour Paranormal. Hey, Jared, how are you tonight? Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. This is great.
I was a little worried that the whole hazing thing that we did last time after that episode would kind of scare you away, but I really appreciate your courage, man.
Alpha Cow Omega. Yes.
Yeah.
Whatever the...
Well, some of it, at least. I didn't think you would, but...
Yeah, whatever the fraternity is, yes. It's now you will drink from the goat horn. Okay. Because it has been done.
No, really, I'm really excited to have you back on here tonight. Thank you so much for appearing again. So let's get into some of these subjects that I have. Some are in the form of questions. I'll do my best to kind of phrase them as such. But let's jump right into consciousness. Okay. Lots of different interpretations of what consciousness is, especially when it comes to the spirituality end of things. Very subjective, to say the least. Now, what are your thoughts on, let's say, the Dogon tribe and other isolated cultures that have had extraterrestrial contact at the foundation of their creation stories or belief systems? Is there really something there for us to be studying, or do you think these are more in the way of folklore in amongst that culture?
I think that completely underappreciated, and I know it gets pointed at bulls everywhere, indigenous tribes. The issue is always, they live in a way that's very simple. They don't know what, technology is. And the reality is that oral traditions, the way that they have them, the arguments made that when you write things down and you don't actually pass them on in memory, that you can manipulate them more easily. It's, literally 1984, we're at war with this group. No, we're not. Now it's repaste all the news and everything in history because it's written. Whereas I think oral traditions tend to hold on to their oldest and most hallowed truths because they have to memorize them. And I although humans are humans, we have Gregorian monks. Hey, this is not how this chapter of the Bible, in the column that I corrected it. I want credit. And so it's not like some shaman can decide that, I really like this story about this plant and incorporate or tweak, but are the fundamentals the same? I think that they have proven to be accurate, at least as accurate as any written historical record that we rely on, whether it's the Hindu Vedas or the Bible as a reference point for geographical locations of just like there is a city here that corresponds to this writing. And there are, I think, indigenous peoples that these traditions, are they directly visited by aliens? Well, we have the Book of Enoch. It has been well spoken about, and so we won't dwell on it, but it's in the Ethiopian Christian religion still. It is still in a few, but the Book of Enoch has been considered a Gnostic text because you have Enoch literally being delivered. He doesn't die. He's picked up by a spaceship. He leaves Earth. Not only does he view the earth, come back and leave, but he never dies. But he's referenced by Jesus. He's referenced in the Old Testament. So even though they take out the book, they still reference a guy who is definitely interacting with aliens. And here you have these tribes who are like, well, we interacted with people, that clearly appear to us as alien. That therein lies the issue of, for instance, for my book or for what we're talking about, which is it's not aliens worse, it's us. the chances are that there is, based on all the evidences of our consciousness abilities and what we're finding all over the earth, from these cymatic polygonal blocks to engineered soil to, well, a number of things that
Mhm.
some of which we touched on. The reality is that there is a solid indication that our consciousness is connected to the physiology of how we actually plug into the planet and
Mhm.
how we experience it. And we all have had, you and I have talked about some of your experiences, and there are absolute what we are describing as paranormal or extraterrestrial or ghost, and we don't appreciate that that's all one technology. It's a possibility that we are experiencing it differently and we have a different descriptor for it. But for a tribe to give an honest assessment of, we had an interaction with the gods or with these people from another planet, well, what they know is a ship flew over and a ship landed, and or they looked alien. The reality is that we have consistent stories, and even the Bible, saying that there are advanced people on this planet that are looking to be possibly alien, but likely us, people who survived a cataclysm. Frequently, recently coming up, and I'm trying to make people more aware of this, is that we're all pointing back to the Younger Dryas, that 11 to 12,000, 13,000 years ago. Hey, there was a big flood. But I like to point out, I only point it out because it's really significant in that there are pyramids. It looks like
Mhm.
there's polygonal construction, but that city off of Cuba, where it's like, okay, that was above water, even if you count for plate shifting, at least 50,000 years. So somewhere prior to the Younger Dryas, and within 50 to 60,000 years, there was another super negative event. Now, whether
Mhm.
it was natural or whether it was warlike conflict or combo, the reality is that society that was global, and the reason I point back to it being at least that event is because we have not only this one city that's sunk 2,300 feet, we have all sorts of things missing, even Doggerland, but the other reason I say this is because we have Solon. We like to reference the Greeks and the West, and we like to reference that Solon goes to Egypt and he says, you know, you Greeks are very young now, but you're very old. You're very ancient, very advanced people. And the Egyptian priest tells Solon about, and he writes it all down, and he says, well, the Egyptian said, well, we have a very long lineage too. The dynastic Egyptians actually go back 36,000 years. And the Sumer, you know, country, well, Sumerians, but the
Mhm.
country of Sumer, they believe they have a king's list that goes back 264 to 280,000 years, depending on, they have not, it's not like they found one king's list, they found a bunch, and they're still finding things, and we still haven't translated millions of cuneiform tablets. But here we have a king's list that, again, pre Younger Dryas, and it goes back 246,000 years. But what's important is that I like the Egyptian one, because if they have dynastic history of 36,000 years,
Mhm.
it definitely goes pre Younger Dryas,
Mhm.
and it's definitely that you're looking around going, okay, clearly whoever was here, the dynastic Egyptians came in just like the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Olmecs and the Toltecs. They, whether in South America or in Asia, they came into a society that had already been wiped out, obliterated, and they came in on ruins and they readapted and reused those ruins.
Yes.
So therein lies the stories then, where we have tribes, we have even biblical stories, all of them echoing to a time period. And more we're coming to find true that some of these statements that they thought was allegorical and wasn't a big deal, like, oh, you know what, they knew where all the suns and stars and the equinoxes, and they understood summer and winter solstices, and they understood the precession of the stars, but they kind of forgot how years were counted. So when they say 36,000 years, they don't know what they're talking about. And that always blows my mind, is that we have consistent stories, including these tribes that like the Cherokee.
Mhm.
I did that interview with Mary Joyce about the Cherokee Little People, and the whole reason the Cherokee called them the Moon-Eyed People. These were these little blonde-haired, blue-eyed. Well, not just that, but they were Celtic dwarves of a such that the Cherokee called them the Moon-Eyed People, because even the moon was too bright for them. They lived underground. They only came out at night, and only when there wasn't a full moon. But that we have stories of little people from Hawaii to all of Europe. And the reality is that the Moon-Eyed People, for the Cherokee, they were not friends. They did not get
Mm.
along. And whether it's South you can go all the way to the Southwest and talk about the Cherokee Little People, or you can talk about them in the Appalachians, and they found lots of graves for them in the early 18, like we're talking pre 1814, and this is just significant in that, again, more native indigenous people around the world discussing humans that exist, and we always think, well, if you think the time frame we're given, you think lineally, and you think, well, 50,000 years ago we were all banging rocks, so these people were also primitive. So when we always, I think people have to start detaching. The minute you say 50,000 years ago, or 30,000 or 10,000, you automatically assume primitive. And right now we have 150 tribes, like the Sengali Indians, which, made the news when they don't know if there's 8 left or 30, and that missionary tries to go there, and this indigenous tribe off of India, the Sengalis, they don't have outside people. It's against the law to go there. In fact, that's how a lot of these natural tribes died off, is that missionaries and conquistadors and people came with diseases that these people don't have, and they ended up killing this missionary just like 3 years ago. And even Marco Polo said, these people are really vicious, don't go to this island. He literally said, avoid these people. But that you have people like that today. This is not, they've been around. So we make this assumption that when we find an ancient campfire, we find something, we think, oh yeah, these are well, see, lineally, we were all like that then. But no, that's a campfire from last week, and we have Jeeps and Android phones over here, and they're living with tribal fires over there, and both will leave a historical record. Both will leave something that can be found. So I think the echoing stories are super fascinating, and they need to be listened to. They need to be written down. It's super important. But like you said, is it a story? Therein lies the other issue. Are they just passing down an experience that was something that happened to their tribe? What would be really interesting is to look at their genetics and look at their stories and see how their genealogies and their stories line up.
Yes.
Strictly to marry the story with when it really happened. Like what if that story is something they've been passing down, like the biblical stories, it happened 2,000 years ago, or this Old Testament story happened this many years ago, and they can actually marry the two, again, story and the fact. I mean, we know that there were blonde-haired, blue-eyed Indians, natives. We're not talking about just Vikings and possibly earlier.
Hmm.
There are connections with the Phoenicians, Canaanites, you name it, all in America. We have this very warped history that we're told, but I guess that's not entirely the point. We're sticking
But
with the
no,
native
that's
indigenous tribes.
I love your answers. They're so comprehensive, and you just do one of those loop back around. We've talked about this. This is why it's so awesome to talk to you. I have a question for you. All right, if back then we were so in touch with the equinoxes and the alignments of certain celestial bodies and so forth, and we understood the impact that not only had on us, but in the environment and the planet at large, in the universe, perhaps. Okay, if we had that sort of knowledge, and that's really our natural proclivity, okay, of existence, wherein do you think, well, clearly we made a change in our perception of time and how, perhaps we function under certain ideologies, if you will, okay? So now we're the slave to a clock. Okay, we're not really paying attention to what's going on in the stars and so forth, which is, again, I think, denying something natural within us. I guess my question is, do you think that switch over into what we understand now and perceive time as being, and those sort of events, do you think that was an intentional switch over? Do you think there was somebody sitting at a desk and flipping a switch saying, okay, we're going to do this for this specific reason, we're going to give people this new perception? Or do you believe it was something inlaid within consciousness levels and how we may naturally dip in and out of certain realms of consciousness, so to say?
Yeah, I think there's a couple parts to this. One is, well, we've talked a little bit about being 10 to 15% conscious. I think that there are two parts. One is we had terraformed the planet at one point, this ancient advanced human society, that we were connected to the planet, literally connected. We have genetic abilities that I think were programmed, like synesthesia, where we have different senses where we could touch, feel, taste. not only things that were shown to us, but one of the abilities of synesthesia is to see someone else and say they gave someone a hug. They could actually feel what that person
Hmm.
felt or feel what that sensation. And there are different abilities that are part of this programming that combined with a managed planet, which was really, again, we think of technology as external hard pieces, and we do have bioengineered things.
Hmm.
However, we're still discovering 3.5 to 5,000 things a year between bacteria, fungus, but also birds, bats, animals of things we thought were extinct. I mean, we're discovering things every year. We don't know a lot about everything that's on the planet, let alone what was here. So we have to think about being connected to a planet where all of this added to senses of people who were fully conscious that would then have a different experience of not only time, dimensions, of presence, of what are they being present to, how many so it's one thing for us to, both of us can empathize with saying, can you imagine feeling when someone else is being hugged? Could you imagine seeing that, but then feeling or sensing that, or
Yeah.
tasting, we can empathize with that. But can we truly get our heads around being 34% conscious and experiencing not just a hug, but experiencing uh, love, hate, and otherwise between a group or a
Right.
collective or a country?
And actually experience that the way that
Yeah.
the
And so
person up
what
front. Yeah.
is your time reference? Yeah, yeah. What would be your experience of that?
Yeah.
What would be your sensations of time and space when you're present to the ebb and flow of an emotion of sadness to happiness to sadness to bliss to or vice versa, or death? What's it like to be present in a room with someone you loved who but you're not there, you're 1,000 miles away, or you're halfway across the planet, but your pineal gland, you're connected to the earth, you're part of this engineered network, these piezoelectric ground qualities, but you're also got this direct uh, collective consciousness connection, and you're there with your loved ones together, but not only with them that are in the room while your loved one is dying. I'm just using this as an example. It could have been a birthday. I guess I could have gone there. How's that for not dark hour paranormal? We're going dark. So they're dying. There's no more birthdays for this person. That's why we're no birthdays. So there you are. You're in this room and this person's dying. No birthdays. And they are, and you're sensing and experiencing these people in this room. But what if collectively you and the other loved ones that are not present, you can sense and feel them from all of those locations?
Right.
A-
Overwhelming.
Right. So I think that our experience I've debated this back and forth where in my mind about as we become more conscious again, and as we use abilities like, I'm a big popular fan of Wim Hof
Hmm.
and the Wim Hof method. And there's a way to turn a light switch and suddenly you are present to sensations and the universe around you in a way that does not connect you to just meditating about your problems, leave them at the door and downward dog. And no, you don't have to do that when you're with you. By the way, when I say Wim Hof, the first thing that comes up is, don't you have to get cold? The breathing technique and all that work is done. You don't have to go get cold afterwards. You don't have to go take an ice bath. However, it is pretty trippy because the methodology continues and there's a sensation when you are doing both. But you can, I mean, even if you're not, it's really cool. But this is one microscopic way that we're reconnecting at 10 to 15% consciousness. And by the way, when I say that general number, I've said it a lot on a lot of shows, but for everyone
Hmm.
out there listening, here's a caveat. One of the things that happened when Einstein donated his brain to science is that when they sliced it open, and one of the things they pointed out was that his synapses, where we think as of now that memories are stored, it branches out, and that the firing pins at the end of what they describe as looking like a tree. So, like, let's just say there's a bunch of branches, but then when they sliced it open, look at it, had like that, like tons. It looked like a giant mature oak tree had been turned upside down, and the
Huh.
synapses is where he stored memory. So we have to consider that 10 to 50% conscious for different people. What if in reality Einstein had these massive synapses and he was very good at, there's a lot of criticisms of his personal life, how he derived a lot of his theories, and whether or not they were taken from some French scientists, which they were, by the way, and possibly his family helped, i.e., wife. And there's a bunch of stuff around this, but let's just take Einstein, still brilliant, still interesting, did what he did at 10% of his brain because of all those extra firing, all that extra memory capacity. What if it wasn't that it didn't automatically make him 15 or 18% conscious? What if he was still, based on his positive gene expression, the way he ate, the way he exercised, what he put in and out of his body, and the way he, again, meditative work, the way he connected with the earth? What if Einstein was, based on his smoking or drinking habits, all of it up and down, measured out? Einstein did everything he did at 10% conscious, not at 15 or 20.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, what if you have someone who's at that 15% conscious range and activating and connecting with some of these more esoteric systems, but they don't have the same synapses connections as Einstein does, but at 15%, or that looks like Einstein's 10, or you know what I mean? There's
Mm-hmm.
there could be a mathematical, we can't assume that each one of us is using more or less than the
We don't
other.
know.
Makes
Right.
right. And we're not saying that we could measure what it looks like then to use more of that consciousness. I just think it's a really interesting
Well,
digression.
when you're talking about consciousness, I think we're seeing pretty eye to eye on this subject, at least in the way of being able to discuss it. Because again, when we talk about consciousness, there's many different interpretations. What do you mean by that? And so forth. How many levels of consciousness do you believe are present on the planet at this time? And we'll stick to perhaps the human race, okay, to make it something more compartmentalized. And the Dogon tribe and Aboriginal tribes have been said to exist within some sort of second dimension, where the rest of us are sort of on a third dimensional consciousness. And the difference to really kind of wedge between the two there is similar to what you're saying. On a second level of consciousness, you are experiencing more of the collective. So perhaps for someone in an Aboriginal tribe in this state of consciousness, one of the hunters goes out, cuts his foot while he's out on the path, and somebody back at home knows it because they feel it, just like you're describing here. So how many different levels of consciousness do you think that we're in, or at least that can be embodied here on the earth now? I mean, I have more to say about that, but yeah, please start there.
I'll take that challenge and come up with a short answer. To quote Monty Python, a lot.
I love it.
Yeah. Okay.
I love it.
So, okay, longer answer. I think that that's a really interesting question. I don't think that we could, including our advanced ancient relatives that are flying around in some super advanced craft that we're mistaken for UFOs frequently, not the military ones, not the super, yes, we may have visitors, but I'm saying our advanced ancient relatives are pretty conscious. I don't think I have this feeling that they're not back where they were, because part of it involved terraforming a whole planet, maintaining the frequencies and management of the planet in its entirety. I think there was a reason behind it. And clearly they don't have the resources or the people, or they've evolved beyond it, or they've accepted a different technology or a different spiritual, physical, mental, techno path. But where we are is, and these are humans we're talking about. So I'm not going to say that they're automatically more advanced than us, but based on all the different, it seems very random. Like, we know that synesthesia is at least 25% of the population. I think it's really all of us. It's just whether it's dormant or not, or experience it one way or the other.
I would agree.
Yeah. And then there are other people who can tap into, we've talked about past lives. So I think it's just skill sets within our highly advanced programming that we're either conscious of or not. Is it like when I was a kid growing up, the 28 what is it, the 28 temples of Shaolin, or what was the one where
Oh God,
the
I know what you're talking
the
about.
dude had the daggers and the buckets, and he had to, and it's like he's helping brother so and so up without spilling his water buckets, without dropping the daggers in his arms, with the and then they're like, "Do not help your brother, although you have advanced." I love that one, but I don't think it's like that. I don't think that. Yes, it's like going to the gym. We all need to be. When I say positive gene expression, it ties more into a paleo thing where what you eat helps program what you are,
Mhm.
and it helps program and access, and it accesses and helps you open up, not only being more energetic, like from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to bed, you have the same energy level, no highs, no lows, no hangry, but then that clears part of your mind. And when your mind's clear and you're doing other meditations, it helps you tap into other things, and how that equates to whether or not you're whatever your exercise, whether you're a climber, whether you're doing some sort of multi whatever, MMA to karate, to whether or not you're just doing some sort of run, you're a runner. I do think balancing out, being a naturalist, a movement type person like Ido Portal or Erwin Lacour, all that stuff is relevant to accessing these different higher functions. But are they separate? Do we have a collective human consciousness? Yes. Is it something that we can and all either connect to or disconnect from or ignore? I think that's more of the issue. So so part of the question, I think, just the natural part of the question is, how do we get to higher states?
Right.
And I think part of it is starting with the practice that you're at, trying a methodology to really activate high functions, which does include, like, I think, like the Wim Hof stuff, or Tibetan Tomo has
Hmm.
been brought. It's been brought here, but it wasn't brought here really, really, really intentionally. I mean, the point, it was supposed to be a secret thing that's done by secret people and a secret monk and a kind of a secret system. And, that methodology is unfortunately dated. If it was going to take us further, it could have and would have. And that's why people like Stig Severinsen, and that, again, he broke some of Wim's records. He's another, breathology is his thing, breathology.com. I think again, I did not use his technique, but he's the guy who sat on one breath using the same meditative states in a basically frozen pool of water. And you can watch it on video as he time lapses 22 minutes on one breath, and does
Jesus.
it. Yeah. And does it comfortably. I can go 5 minutes, which I think is decent,
That's
but
better than I can do.
well, but it's like, it's where it's like, what's happening while it's going on. But I think to get there, it's a combination of starting where you're at. It is absolutely what you eat. It is not numbing. I do believe, personally, I am not on the fence. I appreciate the people who have gone for ayahuasca and gone for that psychedelic cosmonaut sort of deal, where some people are willing to do it. But I've also, from my studies externally, because I've never done it, but my impression is that it's a lot like at our 10 to 15% consciousness. I do believe that when you jumpstart super high end abilities that we have, I do think that when you jumpstart it with something like ayahuasca, what's happening is it's kind of like you and I going, let's meet in a month, bro, and we're both gonna squat 1,000 pounds, and we'll start giving each other roid shots,
Yep.
and that's what I think that is. I think that when you jump into a drug induced, it's basically skipping the line of the paths. It's like, it's, you're on a path to those levels of consciousness. And I think as you stumble or walk, and whatever you fall upon or walk around, I do think the path is relevant. I don't think it's a matter of like, I'm going to do 20 meditations today and I'm going to get to my 20th dimension level of interaction with the universe, because I've done so many meditations a day and I'm wearing red and yellow robes and I'm now bald. And I don't think that's what's going to do it. But I also don't think that, I know from, there are some people I've followed that have done, like Graham Hancock talks about ayahuasca, Sylvia Ivanova, the New Earth lady. She's done a lot of crazy cool work. And she talks about having, I believe the last time I saw a video with hers, it was 154 trips. And yeah, right. And so the deal is that, yeah, there's things about having heart conditions and things are going to hurt you or not hurt you. And, going to one of these McDonald's fast food like ayahuasca centers, like it's become a trendy thing,
Yeah.
versus she gives heavy advice, and so does Graham Hancock, that if you're going to do this, go find a shaman,
Mm-hmm.
a real shaman, spend some time, get to know the society and culture that you're even going to pick that shaman in, and then go through the process to really experience what that shaman can guide you through. Don't go to like the McDonald's ayahuasca center for your 2-day trip in your
Right.
clean room. It's like either way, I think it's important that the people who have chosen to try it, they're communicating back. It's crazy the similar stories. To me, it does clearly show there is collective human consciousness because of what they're experiencing. Even if it's just that they're connecting with the person next to them, they are connecting. We know this from brain entrainment. There's literally brain entrainment apps you can get to hit your different states of mind, and you can get them on your cell phone. But I do think there's something to the collective consciousness that's being proven out by the people reporting back from these trips. But I personally will not be going down that road. But getting to those different levels of consciousness and how many are out there, I think I know Johnny Chong. I haven't brought him up in a while. Seems like he's come up a lot again. But the guy I wrote about, he's a Qigong practitioner you can find him on the tube and you can Google up his videos. And this is a guy that got documented in the 90s that had so much electrical directed energy through his body. He could cure people of different diseases. He could.
I've heard of this.
Yeah, Qigong manifests differently in everyone. But this guy, you can see him starting paper on fire. He's literally like making people jump because he's hitting them with so much current. And then the British brothers that went to do the documentary on him that you can see, which is a little older now, but he also wrote a book about him. And they were trying to scientifically kind of unpack what makes this Eastern medicine practitioner. Somehow there was a break between the East and the West. And I do think that we were once either separate societies or part of one giant so Qigong is a mystification of what was once like feng shui, the brain entrainment, everything else. I think Johnny Chong's abilities and the healing, and when he took on this documentarian, he took him on as a student, he eventually wrote a book about it. You can get the book, but what's important is that they pulled up some scientific work there are already studies that show nuclear cold fusion happening at the mitochondrial level of DNA. That, like me talking about sexy engineered soil, does not excite people who are love and kisses, summer solstice, winter boxes, and hugging fairies and dancing in a little prance around Stonehenge.
It sounds so nice.
Oh my gosh. And we're a little high and we're a little buzzed and everyone loves each other. And the Druids were wonderful. No, they were terrifying, folks. Terrifying. DarkHour Paranormal, terrifying Druids. Up next, deathbed, synesthesia connection.
I love it.
So I don't think that, anyway, so that, I digress. So full circle consciousness levels. I do think that if I was to take a stab, just say, Jared, we need to know how many people are at what conscious level. I think of the potential of being over 15% consciousness. I think we peak, all of us, when you hear God. Some people would say, I've literally spoken to God. I've heard God speak to me. That's one. When you feel like you've been in another dimension, when you tap up either what you think is your own, like a prior life, when you tap something that you would describe as paranormal or ghost-like, you are definitely peaking. You are going beyond the muted safe mode that we have been thrown in. You are either banging on that blinky box and making it like work, even though we don't have the controls down. And so whatever that is, those are spikes that every single one of us, when you take a trip, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who are like, I wasn't into ancient aliens. I wasn't into whether or not the aliens built pyramids or whether or not who I was or ghosts or fill in the blank. And they go to some place like Egypt, they go to the Giza pyramids and they're like, I had the craziest download or experience that I've never felt. It doesn't matter. They go to even in the last couple hundred years, they go to some Victorian manor. They go, I had a feeling I've never felt before. Every single time you've experienced something like that, anything, those are peak So don't look at it as in the Temple of Shaolin where you have to reach certain levels and you stay there and now you're a wizard and master with a, you're now white Gandalf and not gray Gandalf. I think it's more like you jump into being white Gandalf. You're like, we're already, our highest and best avatar of what we were is within the collective human consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always there. Our ability to jump into that suit is right now in milliseconds, billions of seconds, nanoseconds. We jump into it through these different experiences. Now, people who continue to practice and master these meditations, their positive gene expression, their health, and their wellness, and that may include these psychotropic experiences for some people. But when you combine all of it, I think that those are all things that help give you a toolbox that allow all of us to experience those that our highest and most connected 100% conscious superhuman, what are now described as superhuman abilities. They're all within our grasp, but they're not. They are, but they're beyond our current understanding. It's not a matter of if you pass through the one door, now I understand nuclear cold fusion at the mitochondrial level and I can zap my best friend instead of going across carpet for static electricity. It's not like, it's not, I don't think it's that simple. So how's that for a complicated, crappy answer for those that
perfect. It's perfect.
Okay. Because for those of
awesome.
you, if you have to go kiss the Blarney ruin stone, spin 3 times and drink a Guinness for you to reach your next dimension of consciousness, you're doing it wrong.
I mean, I like your analogy of kind of standing in the line, and the way I would kind of expound upon that, at least the way that I'm seeing it as you were talking, is, all right, you're waiting in line, you're going through that line. There's the experience of going through the line. Now somebody comes by from way up above, says, "Hey, come here real quick. I'm going to show you what you're waiting for." So you come over and you take a quick tour of the fairgrounds, and they bring you right back to where you were, and you're like, "Okay, cool, right, all right, yeah, I'll see you when you get there." So the psychotropic drugs, I think that they can, again, give us a window into a quick and very temporal sighting. And yet that's really what kind of drives people. That I think is the point of that tool, is to drive people to find that in a very sober way, because it's already there. I think, there's the good possibility that some of these plants are actually activating core levels of consciousness within us, and then we then experience it through that filter. So it may not even be something as physical as we think. Now, I have something interesting here. On third phase, we covered very recently a couple different sightings, but there was this one over by MacDill Air Base out in was that California? I can't remember exactly where it is, but there's this hexagonal, it's a Star of David shape, and inside of this there are 6 missiles placed very strategically. I'm going to show you this video. You'll hear my commentary over. I'm going to show you a little bit, and I'd like you to give me your interpretation of what the fuck we're looking at here. Okay.
All right.
I mean, if anybody is to ask, I think you would be a great person to start with, at least. All right.
And I'll channel my publisher, Olaf Phillips, and the Secret Space Program, which he wrote.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
All right. Ready? Here we go.
Oh, you're just doing this so we all see your cool graphics. Oh, no, not yours. Okay.
I wish I made that.
This looks like Tron.
Yeah, well, there's that retro feel. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, this is like the Miami
Welcome
Vice
back,
of Tron.
everybody, to Third Phase UFO Report. I am your host today, Michael Roser, and I'd like to take a little bit of time to go over some Google Earth discoveries that have been made in the past year that Third Phase of Moon has released, and we have all been analyzing since. The first one I'd like to bring up is really interesting. It's from MacDill Air Base, wherein we find this tetrahedral shape carved into the Earth at an enormous scale, along with some other anomalies within that design. So we're going to start there, and I'd like to hear what Blake has to say about this, and we'll go further.
From Google Earth, and we're looking at it right now. You guys see it? You see something very strange? Well, let me just pull it up, guys. And what we're going to find within this hexagon shaped, I would say, air pad. I'm not exactly sure what the reasoning why they would make it in a hexagon shape. Let's do a little flyby around and do some 3D fly by. It's a little shaky, but we can see that whatever this hexagon shape represents, there's something very ominous within it. Let me just go back to the 2D. We're going to pull it up.
So essentially what we're looking at here is the Star of David carved right into the face of the earth, again, on a very large scale. In looking at this design, it reminds me of my study of sacred geometry and understanding that this two-dimensional form in its third-dimensional form is called a tetrahedron, and understanding that this is a very predominant configuration within our auric fields, and I believe that it's in the auric fields of any living sentient being, wherein if you are able to access this through certain meditations and disciplines and activate it in an energetic sense, you are able to interdimensionally travel or be able to go any other place in the universe within our timeline. That apparently is what this configuration, again, within our auric field is for. All right, so here we have, you heard a little bit of what I thought, you heard a little bit of what Blake thought from Third Phase of Moon, and we didn't really get into this, but you can see very clearly that there are 6 missiles in each one of these configurations here off on the peripherals. What's your thoughts on this, Jared, when you first see it? What's your interpretation, my friend?
My first desire is to know what direction, like right now from where the video is paused, what direction, what's north, south, east, west from this location, and what is each missile pointing towards?
Well, you can see here, because I had a similar question, and I think there is a point on the base itself that indicates where east is, so we can definitely find that out. But as you look at some of these missiles, you would think that they might line up with the apex of the triangle that's formed here, but they almost appear to be blown around by the wind or something and kind of slightly off axis. So there's not a consistency there in the way that they're placed.
No, I think it has to do. I think the star is symbolic, and I think that the missiles are pointed in the most strategic positions to hit. Automatically, if they're, I don't know what kind of missiles they are. So if they're designed from ground to ground, or they also have surface to air capabilities, then, obviously air is going to go generally, you have all your directions covered pretty well. But I would think that based on their size, not knowing what kind of missiles they are, I would wonder whether or not they were ground to ground and they were facing towards other first or retaliation, strike zones. So
you think these missiles might actually be active and not just symbolic?
Well, the issue would have to be is what's the base it's connected to? Where is this?
This is MacDill Air Base in, I believe it's Florida. Somebody had mentioned.
Okay,
I'm double check that.
So given its location, I guess it would have to be
Tampa, Florida.
It has to be. I have to know what the missiles are. We know their range. We would know, what they're capable of hitting, and the fact that they're not in bunkers and they're surface mounted. They got to be ready to go fast. There's got to be a reason that they're just sitting there. We just can't see if they're mounted or how they're mounted. So that therein lies an issue, and you never know if someone does something like this as a joke. I know it sounds terrible, but did somebody do the geoglyph simply because they could and they wanted it proved out that they could do it, like leaving a monolith in the desert for 8 years?
Right.
And then it finally became a big deal. Like, when is it going to be a big deal? Now. And so, the question is it intentional or not? And then, you can imply all sorts of fun stuff from this. You could say, well, is this, even though it's in the United States, is it in control of a foreign power? Is it strictly supposed to be a shout out? Is it strictly, hey, we got your back? We don't know what it is. And then at the same time, it could be simply a practice. It could be a practice area. Like you said, there's something to general geometries for targeting and for also, it's not that this symbol isn't incredibly famous. The issue is whether or not these target zones are developed or designed. Because this is runway stuff too. Depending on whether or not you were training one direction or another for runs, like target runs. So there's like a million different reasons why this could be here at this base. I mean, what's to the left of it here? It looks like a larger takeoff. I mean,
This base is really expansive when we kind of zoom out and we see some of the other designs. Nothing as intricate as this in respect to, hey, I recognize that as a very foundational shape in sacred geometry. There are these circles that have smaller concentric circles within it. That to me is very interesting. Absolutely. But the fact that this is on a military base and the fact that, this is very formal geometry that they're using, it really looks like some sort of grid. And if there aren't energetic implications here, perhaps what you're saying is correct. And this might be, any of the above that you mentioned, either a shout out or something having to do with foreign powers or an ode. We don't really know, but a speculation is really interesting. I've just never seen anything like this wherein the missiles seem to be intentionally placed, again, almost as if it was a crystal grid of some sort.
Well, the one thing is that when we start using the terms like sacred geometry, if it really mattered, I know this is a geoglyph, but it's very poorly done. You've got overextended lines at on every side. They're overextended. They've been worn out. They've been run on, and so it's pretty clear that. And the shape, you can tell the lines are very wavy. So it's almost like a graffiti. It's like a spray paint. It's like we get the general shape. It's just not incredibly well done. And then I'm looking at the potholes that are in the middle. I mean, they're not potholes like at this distance. I mean, this is stuff that you look for, like Sarah Parcak's Global Explorer team. You can become a citizen archaeologist by joining her. She won the TED Talk years ago, like 3 years ago. And now you, as a citizen scientist, can look at plat maps. They don't let you know where they are, but they teach you, are you looking at a hole that's been dug by a grave robber? Are you looking at a new archaeological site? Are you seeing a geoglyph? And when you see the potholes that are all over here in the middle, you got to wonder. And then off to the left, the upper left above the road there, it almost looks like it's an area that's been hit, like it's a, and again, like it's just for targeting and for practice. So the question is whether or not these are, you can see you could see all the, clearly they're driving all over it. Cause when you zoomed in, you can see all the tracks in and out. So they're in each one, they're far enough apart. Yeah. So that looks like a command center. That looks like a dish. That's a truck. It looks like, right? Like a semi. And
yes, it does look like that.
Yeah, if you zoom back, you don't have to, but it looks like something like that. So it's either for, I'm not an expert in the area, but to me, knowing, you can see the truck to the lower right, you can see, and then the cabin and the dish in the back, and
two dishes
it looks like
here,
it looks like they're pulling a trailer, an open trailer, and then you can see all the tire ruts, but you can see some cracks in the ground. So it's interesting if it's like a multi-purpose target area, practice area. It is an interesting space.
Cool.
I've never seen it.
No, that's awesome. And I wanted to try something a little different tonight and bring this out to get your opinion on it. And thank you. Fantastic. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear, something comprehensive in that way. And it's a different perception than what I thought when I first looked at it, which is also very curious. And again, something that we can sit down with this now and look at that through that lens to see what rings true, because it might be a culmination of different facets of each theory. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily one thing or the other. It could be, again, a merging of some of these elements. So excellent, dude. Well, thank you for entertaining that. It's fun. Third Phase of Moon is a great sister channel, and we repurpose these videos that sometimes, this one was almost a year old. Bring it back. So, okay.
It's fun.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think it's really cool because there's, when it comes to sacred geometry, and we're like, oh, well, how important is it? Well, if sacred geometry is so important, the first thing I like to ask myself when I look at something like that, especially on a geoglyph level, look at the Nazca lines and then look at the graffiti of all the animals. That's all primitive. The Nazca lines themselves don't vary an inch for miles, for kilometers. It's like 25 kilometers. One of the longest ones is, it's incredible because they don't vary left or right, and then you have this very interpretive, no big deal. They drew a monkey on it. Great. But here you have this, like you said, it looks like sacred geometry, but it's very poorly drawn. So if the geometry mattered, it would be done better. But if the symbolism mattered, well, they drew the symbol, but they didn't they overpainted the lines and they drove over it. And so clearly the symbol itself is not the issue. The overall ideology of this symbol might mean something, but it's clearly not the lines themselves. They're not drawn well. So they're symbolic at a minimum, and they're not very respectful of the exactness of the geometry.
Which is something you would figure would be there if this was something more. That makes sense. That makes sense. Let's move on to the Hollow Earth. What do you say, man? All right. So this is a very big subject and something that we can literally sink right into the way that you sink into your grandmother's old couch. Hollow Earth. If it isn't hollow through, could there be caverns large enough to support an ecosystem or even house some sort of light source, which we have heard many times that there might be some sort of energy source that's in the way of a smaller sun in the middle of this planet or somewhere within, again, also in other celestial bodies, but specifically, people talk about this here. What do you think the plausibility of having a hollow Earth and some of the implications in way of the theories that have been developed over time?
I'm going to steal Eric Von Daniken's answer from 2 years ago at Contact in the Desert when they did a panel that was hosted by George Norrie. And I remember sitting there and they went down the line I believe this year at that time, Von Daniken was turning, I think, 84. Wow. And they went down the line. There was like 15 people on the panel. And the question was, is there a hollow Earth or isn't there? And I know it's in video. I know you could probably see this, but I remember, I'll paraphrase Eric Von Daniken when they finally got to him. Do you think the whole Earth is hollow or not? No, it's absolute rubbish. And he goes, is there pockets? Yes. Is there large expanses? Yes. But the whole hollow Earth, I think it's more likely that the moon is hollow. And we know that because the report was that it rang like a bell. Mm-hmm. And again, it's very odd. There's a lot of weird things about the moon that we can speculate on. And if you have a giant 1,000 to 3,000 ton rock cutting cymatic polygonal wave frequency advanced engineering human society, would it be hard for them to create a fixed planetary body that worked at their level of understanding of magnetics and frequencies? Yeah. Internally, are there rock cut ruins all over the Earth that aren't the ones we're not talking like Petra Jordan we're talking about that Turkey, all over Europe. And we're not talking catacombs that were repurposed or mimicked for graves. We're talking massive rock cut tunnels in the Andes between, and about those Nazca lines. And Von Daniken, he and I were talking for a little while, and he goes, Jared, did you know that there's drains? And I said, what do you mean drains? And he said, the Nazca lines, there are pits where ultimately when there is rainfall, even though it's the driest place on Earth, that when it does rain, that there's an actual an ancient plumbing system that comes from the Andes. And it also includes drains that are in the Nazca lines in the areas, and they never get talked about ever because you can't explain an advanced ancient drainage system / plumbing system that goes into the Andes to rock cut tunnels through the hardest stones on Earth. And we're not talking like crumbly little Barney Rubble tunnels or Wild E. Coyote painted it on a wall tunnel. We're talking, well, more like that in that it's very, very well hewn. So you have a society that's been way underground a ton through multiple cataclysms and catastrophes. And we have multiple examples of archaeologists running into massive underground complexes that have been abandoned, and that is a fact. That is a thing. However, on the hollow Earth theory, I am going to for Not Aliens, I have a member area, and I'm only bringing it up because you are the first person, and everyone here, I'm totally outing Gary for this. So the host of everything imaginable is Gary. Now, Gary's been a podcaster for a while. Well, he is going to and is about to, I guess, interview the grand child of Admiral Byrd. And
Wow.
so for the first time, I think you're hearing it first. And this is total, should be insider, like you and I talking after the show stuff. It sounds like also he seems to have connected with someone whose grandfather was also part of the expeditionary force.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we're talking right to, the battle in the, we're talking the whole deal back in 47. And he is likely going to be doing an interview about this, and we'll have to connect on the date and time. But I don't know anyone who has talked to anyone related to Admiral Byrd since the general story of the diary is out.
Right.
And that we have this operation to discover, well, either it's a giant cave, hollow earth that only 2 people went to. There was a pit, and there was, there's only a couple of people to go into it. And we do know, weirdest thing, it's like, why does Buzz Aldrin get invited to Antarctica, and Bill Clinton and John Kerry? Why are all of them invited? No one likes penguins or getting cold that much. No one. And they all go to Antarctica within a month. You send a guy who's been to space to go get his opinion on something in Antarctica. I mean, everyone should still be like, that's exciting. There's something there.
Yeah.
But I don't know that what's important to me is, I know that the Antarctica cave that is talked about, that is the entrance to this underground world and sun, is accessible in the sense that you can't drive, or you can't fly there for sure, but you can go via land. So if you get your Husky team together, and it's a matter of money. So if that's all that it is, and we have some explorers and some Iditarod winners that want to go to Antarctica, and if the issue is we just have to go across land for 1,000 miles, I am making an effort to put together a couple archaeological trips. This one's not included, but there are things that we can go do and verify and check that are allegedly open to the public. So they limit the way you can get to it. Like on Scott Walter's America Unearthed, you have the cave where that was found, that was possibly where the Egyptians had made it to in the Grand Canyon. Well, that cave is well known, but according to, for instance, his show, well, you can't fly a drone down there, but you can climb. I'm a climber, and I have friends with lots of ropes. And the reality is that if we can descend into this area and check it out, I think that's a worthwhile endeavor. And those are things that are obtainable. But again, we're all having this dialogue about Antarctica and about this sun and this report from Admiral Byrd. Well, it looks like he looks like a relative and some third generation children might be talking about some of the people that were on that expeditionary force. And it looks like they might start getting on some of these narratives, actually getting on some of these podcasts, including Everything Imaginable. But again, Gary and I just talked about this 2 days ago. So I can't even tell you, I know it's happening, but I think that's just bananas, because here we are speculating and we never get a follow-up. There's never a new thing to say.
Right.
So
no, that's absolutely groundbreaking, and I think that's going to be absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
I use this word a lot, implications. The implications of that are astounding, and I will certainly be paying attention to that developing.
Well, we're gonna have to talk about it offline and just like get on Gary, and like if we can sit in a green room and just listen to this interview. I don't even know if I can wait for it to come out, but those are the kind of things where it's like we all want this info. And some of it, they're like, hey, you can go. We're just going to make it really hard for you to go. And yet there's these adventurers and there's these people with money that we know where it is. We just have to get there. I don't really think it's one thing where we used to say, I'm going to discover the North Pole, see? And then die on the way. It's like, no, we know where this is. We know what the temperature zones are. We know what survives in that kind of condition. We know what kind of supplies we would need. Let's work this out and go to the moon here. But that's my personal gripe. As far as, is it possible that the earth is hollow? No. Is it theoretical, the center of the earth? I do think there's something to, you have a ball traveling through the universe. that constantly is creating friction and vibration and static electricity, which we've now discovered the ionosphere disperses by sending lightning to the earth, which immediately goes to a core, which seems to me like a self-perpetuating heating machine, like it's intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, nature, it's natural, there's lightning. It literally keeps feeding a power core. And that's the question. Like what kind of action is it? Really just random gases formed and created this particular planet? Is it intentionally, terraformed right down to its creation, its exact placement from the sun, the moon, and its exact weirdness, and the way it manages our tides, and the way it
Tidal lock
magnetic
and so forth.
yeah, why is it magnetically set? It's like it's like a giant. It's like the entire solar system is one kind of giant mantle clock
Well,
on a
that's an
yeah.
interesting interpretation, on the idea of the moon here. I'll ask you something quite frankly. Did we ever go to the moon the way we believed we did in 1969? What do you think?
Yeah, I was super bummed when I started getting the data. Like, there's no way we went, and here's all the camera angles.
Mhm.
And then, of course, I was mostly upset because I was already into filming the cities, and I was already into doing stuff with cameras. It's a hobby, it's an interest of mine. But it really frustrated me because I'm like, they were making solid arguments, and then the Kepler, like just the radiation belt, the explanation as to copper, the way it would look, the there was a lot of things that made me go, gosh, it looks like you can make an argument that we did not go.
Right.
But then we have things like, well, yeah, and then there's all the things about the Earth being or the moon being a hologram. But then we have instrumentation placed on the moon, and so we at least got, at a minimum, we got robots and rockets to the moon, and we placed some laser discs that everyone around the world can measure. It's you can actually you can reflect a laser measuring device because they've placed refractive units on the moon. So it's not like we haven't gotten to the moon. And then it requires a lot of people to be lying, and it just doesn't seem to be the case. I think
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I think we got there.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that. There are a lot of people who will say that it's sort of a toss up between the two. We did go to the moon, okay, but there were also where there is some footage that was filmed in a studio, and then everything kind of merged together. I think personally, within the research that I've done on this through many years, I think that's probably the most plausible explanation. But again, that still means we went to the moon the way that we thought we went to the moon. But there might be some gray areas within. We know we went there.
Yeah.
It would make sense too. I don't see why they wouldn't have the technology. I understand that what they're using, even still today, at least as far as we know, is based on Newtonian physics, which has its limits. And obviously the reason why they've gone further with Einstein's theory and quantum field theory and so forth, that don't necessarily encompass Newtonian physics. But at that time, that's what they had to work with, at least I think on the most basic level. And we're not talking about black projects or secret governments or anything like that. Just what NASA was working with and some of those organizations affiliated, that it was Newtonian. So yeah, I agree with you on that. Let me ask you this here, because this is very curious and also very personal to myself in certain ways, but it's still something I can't wrap my head around. Okay. If Atlantis was never mentioned before Plato's work, why are we so convinced such a place existed? Lemuria is also said to have a similar literary origin, and it literally means land of lemurs. So if these places did exist, number one, I know that they probably weren't called Atlantis and Lemuria. Okay. But why do you think people have recollection, or, say that they have recollection of living in this sort of city that apparently encapsulates everything we understand Atlantis to be?
Yeah, I think that our earliest understanding of an advanced human society is to say, oh, Atlantis. And so what we know is Solon is who Plato got ultimately his info from. And Solon is the one we talked about earlier, who goes to the Egyptians, and he gets shown the king's list that, Egypt's been around 36,000 years. He's the one who's told about Atlantis. And I think Jimmy from Bright Insight, his work on the recot structure, there's a 3-part series, and I think they nailed it. I do think that based on it, to surmise quickly, it's the world, the Greek map, and where the Eye of Africa or the recot structure is in northern and western Africa really does it has the concentric rings. It doesn't matter if it's a natural geological formation, but it has sea, it has saltwater remnants of creatures, clams, you name it. It has bones of elephants. It has exact rings. It has exact mountain locations. It has everything as described. And I do think that as we get down to our 10 to 15% consciousness, I do believe that when you get back to the Greek period, you have an incredible level of intelligence. And I don't think they exaggerated as much as we think, or we think a lot of what they were saying was allegorical, when in reality it was, no, they were repeating what they really heard that was a truth. So I think when it comes to the Atlantis, the idea of it being a city, part of it could be we had an ancient advanced society 55 to 60,000 years ago. Let's just say everything goes to crap. They go underground. Our highly advanced ancestors are in ragtags, and they're not all together. Not as many survived as they thought. They did not recover all the technology they wanted, but when they did resurface, dynastically, much of the world had been, tribes had moved into these wrecked cities and locations like the Great Pyramid of Giza area, and in Central America and in South America. And they took over those locations. And then hypothetically, one could say one of the only known outposts could have been this Atlantis city, where they were said to be more advanced and more, it could have been the last time the surface survivors of this diluvian disaster 50,000 plus years ago, and after 12,000 years ago, it could be the last publicly seen advanced human settlement.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we were to say that they existed, so it's possible that, like, again, we have Viracocha for South America. There's a god, red-headed, red-bearded dude shows up and teaches them farming and teaches higher learning and helps them get out of survival mode. I mean, isn't that like ancient, high, advanced human Peace Corps? Isn't that what that is?
Yeah.
And so I think the fascination, part of it is the fascination with Atlantis, which is the idea that a more advanced human race did exist. It's like, we know it's true. And we feel like, and for the longest time, it's if we find Atlantis, then we can prove it out. Even though we ignore all the aliens, UFOs, and everything we keep seeing, we are seeing that these people exist on this planet now. And because they exist on this planet now, they are, again, mistaken for UFOs, but they're these advanced ancient aliens. If we're gonna, or ancient human ancestors, if we're gonna mistake them for aliens, as they retreat, the Atlantis story is the remnant of it. And now, because it becomes like Lemuria, like you said, it's these other lost lands. But we know we've lost lands, like the city we started talking about off of Cuba, and all of Doggerland. I only bring it up because people can Google or internet search that really quickly, and they can find those places. And like even 4,000 years ago, a significant amount of land near the Baltic Sea and around Ireland, Scotland, I mean, that whole area to France, that whole area had a lot left even 4,000 and 6,000 years ago. That's well within dynastic times, and all that land's gone. And so we tell ourselves, here's the map of the world, and we scratch our heads and go, well, we pretty much can tell where everything is because, well, this is the map of the world. But we're not looking 400 or 1,000 miles off the coast, like some of the locations in India where Graham Hancock dived in the 90s, where you have cities that could have not been above sea level less than, surprise, surprise, 30 to 40,000 years ago. So here we go again. We're talking about genetic memories tied with lost lands. There you go. That's Doggerland. Look at all of that and tell me you know the story of Europe and England.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So just for everyone watching, without you having to well, you can expand it if you want, but the darkest green land, look, like, to give people an idea. This is well known in standard academia. the darkest green area along France and around the United Kingdom, the darkest green areas lasted to even 4,000. You see the number to 7,000 years ago. This is a significant amount of land. And then at 16,000 years ago, pre-Younger Dryas, you have a significant amount of land around Ireland and Scotland and the rest of the UK. All of it is, this is a massive story that is unknown, right down to the rivers and where would you live on the coast. So there's nothing harder than marine archaeology. And right now, even Ancient Origins just did a story recently. I'm going to chalk it up to nano archaeology because they are sifting through saltwater sediment, and they're finding what the fauna was, the flora and fauna during Doggerland being above water. And they're actually able to discern from the parts that they're finding in the sedimentary layer that's in the salt water. They're able to start discerning the above ground, above water flora and fauna of Doggerland. That's super significant. We're not as excited about that because we think, oh, well, that dates to the time of the mastodons. They're not looking at it yet and saying, this is the coastline for the human race. And it's it's like literally 3 feet from the Titanic. Not really, but it's like, it's literally, how ironic, the Titanic sunk and it's literally next to someone's beach house from 55,000 years ago.
That's crazy.
It's right. So it's like, what do we do with that info? Because it's so significant. And even I do want to bring something up about what you had said earlier about, we talked about ayahuasca and psychedelic trips, and you were talking about the benefits of the plants. So what's really interesting about vibrational medicine as an entirety of the subject, we know that we are literally vibrational magnetic creatures. We know that that's how we are made, that it's on a quantum level. We are all energy. And we've talked about this before. And the thing about not just homeopathic, but all vibrational medicine, which homeopathy and all that falls under, is that it is well known. It's the effect of, as you dilute a remedy in homeopathy, it becomes stronger. It has a better effect. In fact, they dilute it to the point where it's almost an echo of the vibrational frequency. And that is the theory, and has been since the late 1700s when this was thought of by a German scientist, where they were using homeopathic remedies to create the reaction in the human body, which was basically acting like a vaccine to create a response, which is how they came up with, it was called like cure likes. It was supposed to be, you created an herbal remedy that created the effects. So like if this particular disease had a certain kind of effects, well, you found the plant remedy that created those same effects. And what they found as they experimented with the levels of modern toxology and modern pharmaceutica says you need to have a super high dose and really flood the body with it for the body to get, for the drug to be high enough for the drug to be doing the killing. Where homeopathy and vibrational medicine, which is really ultimately going to be a marriage of this Newtonian and quantum world with this, or if you want to call it, I don't want to really give Einstein, let's just stick with this quantum medicine that we're at now. There is going to be more and more of a marriage because we discount the placebo / mind over body. And what this vibrational medicine subject really covers is the idea that it's not just fiction to take a remedy from a plant, which is really its frequency and vibration,
right,
and dilute it down to the point where it's just an echo of it within the dilution that you're ingesting. And yet it has the same medicinal effect as if it's this high dose. And ultimately, it's been going through my head that if we ever to really get into a deep conversation about vibrational medicine, and because I'm a big, I like essential oils and stuff like that, but I'm not going for the all woo-woo, whatever. It's like, you have to prove this stuff out. You have to make it work for yourself. But the dilution, what it really lends to me is on the vibrational medicine, on the ayahuasca, it occurs to me that what if the opposite, instead of getting super lit, what if you dilute it to the point where it's not even a matter of you getting an essence of it as a liquid, as an alchemy, but what if we understood the vibrational frequency and energy of every plant and animal, and the connection was just there between us. So it wasn't a matter of you dissecting or mutating the plant to get what it's
Right.
offering. You could just connect with the energy directly because you're fully conscious.
I think there's a lot in there. I think that's a very significant point.
So I thought that would be fun, and maybe that could be like another digression we have on another museum.
Yeah.
But I thought that was pretty trippy, and yeah, I got a book to recommend for you on that later. But
Oh, please. Yeah, I'm all ears. I'd love to read into that. I mean, I think it's fascinating why specific plants have the effects that they do with us. Definitely concerning consciousness. It's definitely a big part of it. And of course, in ancient cultures, we can see that that has been the trajectory for a very long time.
yeah,
Now, recently, we've seen a resurgence in interest of like stargates, wormholes, deep underground military bases.
yeah.
Even over at Third Phase of Moon and Third Phase, we've received several documents pertaining to these and maps that point out stargates and so forth, which at least one of them we've isolated came from a spiritual book that was written some time ago. It's out of print now, actually very expensive to find, but that doesn't necessarily render it invalid. It's just we know where it came from. Have you ever seen any maps or physical indications in respect to the location of stargates throughout our planet, or anything along those lines that you would consider to be accurate and put some stock into?
I think that as we grow in our understanding of our abilities to have energetic, like scalar weapons, Tesla stuff, and
Yeah.
as we start to understand the complexities of what being a vibrational frequency ancient high-tech society looks like, we definitely look to all of our science fiction for an indicator. I'm gonna
Yep. Take your time.
hold on. That was my excuse to drink.
Why ask why? Try Bud Dry.
No. So, yeah. So I do think that people are really. I have a hard time with. I joke about it normally, but in all seriousness, if you think you're listening to an episode of Babylon 5 or Stargate or Deep Space Nine, that's what they're giving you. That's what that is. I mean, it's an exciting. Everyone, we know there's something more going on. We sense it. We feel it. We see it in the soil. We see it in all these ruins, and we're putting this story back together. It's really hard not to then jump ahead and create a fiction about it and create a whole speaking about it. And then once that dialogue's there, it's really hard to not go to some really fun conventions. And again, everybody experiences things differently. So if they've had a number of experiences where they're saying, I've been exposed to this alien creature and this is what they're called, and this is what this alien creature is called. And then you have there's a whole subworld of, the aliens here are doing this to each other, and are there trading cards? I mean, where are you getting this info? And they're all fighting, and it sounds like Lord of the Rings, but it's with aliens, and apparently they're really concerned about fighting the United States military, and and the whole thing sounds like episodes of G.I. Joe, except and so again, it's not that there's not conflict and that there's actual not intrigue and mystery. The idea of stargates, yeah, great scientific concept. Do they already exist? Have they existed? Were we traveling places either physically or through mental amplifiers? Or were we like some of these rock cut gates or these false doors that are in Egypt that are in South America? They're the idea that these doors weren't false doors, that they were energetic transport locations. I think that's the right direction for everyone who's wondering. I wouldn't call it a Stargate. Let's just say that, let me give you an idea. I thought a long time about time travel.
Awesome.
And this ties into where we are. So the entire world is here. Well, and by world, like we're one solar system that is within a galaxy that's spinning within multiple galaxies that's spinning, and then what's happening is they're all traveling. So when you say, I want to get in a car, let's just make it our DeLorean at 88 miles an hour, and we want to go back in time, or H.G. Wells style. When you go backwards in time and you're in a vehicle in geospace, well, if your planet and universe, if your galaxy and your planet was over here 1 hour ago, we only look at the speed of Earth relative to the sun, relative to the solar system, relative to the galaxy. We have a heart of what we think is the center of the galaxy, but we have a very relative proportions of speed. So let's just say you want to go back in time 1 hour, but if the length of my screen here represents the entire known universe, and you decide I'm going to go back in time and here's my planet and solar system an hour ago. Based on the evolution, when you spin backwards, your ship not only has to if it just spins and goes backwards and appears back in time, if the ship hasn't moved, your ship's here where your planet was, but your whole galaxy and everything could have spun from over here. And from where your ship is to where that galaxy has gone, that you have to actually not only set time going backwards, you have to be directional in your travel, like through a wormhole.
Right.
You need to theoretically I don't think people think about that everything is spinning, evolving. And so a stationary time traveling device doesn't rewind you with the planet relative to the planet. It just rewinds you in that machine relative to time. It's not moving you on the planet. You and the machine have now become an encapsulated entity like a TARDIS, but it actually has to travel to where we were an hour ago. It's not just spinning the whole solar system. Everything has moved maybe 100 light years, maybe more. And in reference to the galaxy, in reference to everything, again, you start spinning and go back in time, you're here, and everything else is over there. And the distance between you and there is what? Half a galactic turn, which is literally you're going to die in space because you chose to go an hour back in time. Now let's go back 100 years. Where the hell is our planet? Oh, we're on it, But again, if your whole computer screen is your traveling orbital universe and all of it's moving always, then you don't have to just go back in time. You have to go back somewhere over there somewhere. Does it make sense?
It does make sense. And, in a perfect model of a wormhole, let's say, you don't necessarily have that much of a margin of time dilation as, you would expect within certain theories. And, what you're proposing, all right, listen, a lot of trouble, I think, was had when certain bodies began to experiment with time travel. And now I'm going into the woo a little bit in terms of projects and stuff. It's hard to avoid. But that being said, I understand that they had a lot of trouble discerning the location that they wanted to appear at. So if they left here in the studio and went ahead, let's say 100 years, okay, they wouldn't necessarily end up in the same space. They didn't have a way to kind of calculate that. Now, over experimentation, empirical in form, they were able to secure that. I have no idea how. But, in the math, in the physics, theoretical physics and math, this does seem incredibly possible as long as certain compartmentalized areas are met. Okay. So for example, for those of you listening here, the paper that I read recently on stargates and wormholes really stressed that it is a possibility, but there were 4 or 5 compartmentalized elements that had to be figured out first. So for example, you would literally have an experiment to you have a how do I want to put this? You have a formula in front of you, okay, or a question as large as can you time travel physically? And you have to answer this question first before you can get to that bigger question. So again, in a perfect world, when those conditions are met, I think that it's very possible we could do the, physical time travel the way that you and I might surmise.
Well, we have to predict. Again, it's almost a better analogy is that it's not a two-dimensional trip. It's not going left to right. It's the distance between this. It's if we reduce the universe to our computer screen to where we're sitting, and everything in it is moving relative to each other. So again, to go back in time, you have to pick the point in time and space that you want to appear in the universe. You can't just choose, I want to go back in time and I'm going to be on this planet 100 years ago. No, 100 years ago, everything was dimensionally somewhere in this space, and we have to be able to go to that point. So we have to know to reference Stargate for the first time relevantly ever for me, the point of them trying to sort out the final symbol of where to you had to have a point of origin, right? So we're at a point of origin, and in order to know the destination, we have to have those spatial coordinates. But those spatial coordinates are only relative to where we're spinning and moving, right? So how do you come up with the geospatial point of destination in the past if you don't have a reference point? You know where you are, but how do you reference where you're from?
Right.
In reference to all these mobiles, just imagine making a zillion mobiles and they're all spinning and moving, and then, make it your gymnasium, and then you tell me how you spin backwards but end up in the gymnasium at the other end of the basketball court 100 years ago, and not be in the middle of the sun by accident or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of add to that. I mean, within the Philadelphia experiment, one of the common oddities that was observed, and I haven't necessarily heard of this in anything else, but it seems to kind of make sense, where these guys were actually embedded into the material themselves, molecularly locked. And to me, that's kind of indicative of something like that, wherein they did traverse through space and time, again, to simplify it. And when they returned and got back into that lock, that they should have been here in this timeline at that particular space, they were sharing a space with something else, another material.
I think that was possible.
Yeah, I think that there's something there. But hey, listen, I think we're out of time for the night, Jared. It always flies by so quickly. I didn't even realize where we were here. But very quickly, can you tell everybody where we can find you? And if you have anything coming up that you'd like to promote, or anybody that is within your circle you'd like to promote, please feel free.
Well, yeah, we'll have to get back to you about that Gary thing. And then as far as, I mean, who doesn't want to hear from Admiral Byrd's relatives, right? But I have my book, It's Not Aliens, Worse, It's Us. It's on Amazon for a few dollars more. You can go to notaliens.com. I have exclusive interviews and a member area also, but I'm giving out books, and I'm also doing, if you sign up for 6 months or a year. So you can go to Not Aliens, and on the first page always shows where I'm coming up. Like if I'm going to be on your show, I always link to it. Once they're done, I will add those. You can always go listen to other shows I'm on. Actually, next week, I'll be interviewing on Conflict. I'll be interviewing Daniel and Teresa Duke, the great grandkids of Jesse James.
Ooh.
And it gets even better. There's a Templar Knight connection with buried treasure and Jesse James, and that he faked his death and lived out his life in Texas. And I would rely on the great grandkids to have done 20 years of research each and written about it. So that should be fun. That's what's immediately coming up. But I'm always co-hosting on Conflict Radio, and there's always some fun stuff there. We just did an interview with Christopher Dunn. That's up, a live show we just did. But
you were on SOR recently, right?
Which one?
You were on Space Out
I
Radio
was
recently, right? Yeah.
I was on Spaced Out Radio with Michael Hall. We do that once a month at the end of the month. I'm on Spaced Out Radio. That just happened, so you can go listen to that. And I was just on Three Beards podcast last night.
Fantastic.
So you could be on Three Beards. You could be the fourth beard. Take a guess their theme.
I've got it. You know what I mean? You let me know, brother.
Hey, yeah, actually, in a few weeks, you should totally join. But yeah, I appreciate being on.
Hey, well, we appreciate you being here. It's always an interesting and enlightening conversation with you. And one thing I've noticed is what you say gets people to think. Doesn't matter which way that they're thinking. It's that it's the impetus to get them moving. It's that catalyst that I think is really sort of unique and rare. You know, there are a lot of people who will come up and just kind of regurgitate things that they've studied and not necessarily put so much thought into the conversation at hand and perhaps the thought that went into the material before being questioned about it, the way that I see you present material. So you always have a home here at Dark Hour Paranormal.
Oh,
And
that's nice.
you're cool with that, man. We'll definitely have you back again, Jared.
That I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be cool because the other thing, it goes back on the host too. If you didn't do the background and the work that you've done, this would be a different animal, and it's just awesome being on every time. And I really love that you're telling me that the guests are really into it, or that everyone listening is really digging what we're talking about. I love that. I appreciate it.
Oh, hell yeah, dude. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here once again tonight. And as always, I'll take you off for a moment and I'll say my proper goodbyes off camera if you can hang out for a moment. And from there. All right, guys, definitely go and check out Jared's work. Check out the multitude of podcasts and live performances that he's been on, because as you can tell, this gentleman has something interesting to say every moment that is not repetitious. Okay. There's a lot in here. You know, some people do that. They'll just kind of circle and say the same thing different ways. This is not Jared, okay? He's right from the horse's mouth. He gives it to you straight. So go and check out his work, please, and absolutely buy his book. Okay, I'm going to say it straight out. Buy his book because I've read it. It's fantastic, and you will very much enjoy it as well. All right, Jared, thank you very much. I'll take you off at the moment. Cheers. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed that show. A little impromptu was my mistake. I actually scheduled Jared for next week, and through the graces of whatever be, he decided to contact me to confirm tonight. And that was a couple hours before the show went on. I said, oh shit. Okay. Yes, let's do it. All right, good. So here we are. And it turns out to be another excellent show, which is exactly what I expected the next time I sat down with Jared. Once again, thank you very much for being here. I'm not going to take too much time closing out because we've run over on Goofon. Please go and check him out. He'll be on at least for another hour and 15, hour and a half or so. Check that out. Goofon Richie Giordano. Of course, there may be something coming up with Third Phase of Moon later on tonight. Usually there is. I'm not sure if Third Phase is putting something out, but I'll be putting together some videos very shortly to upload on that end. Thank you to Wreaking Havoc for the super chat tonight. I do appreciate each and every one of you that support what we do here at Dark Hour Paranormal. And just for the hell of it, the camera I was talking to you guys about, nothing special, but it is an addition and somewhat of an upgrade when it comes to recording on location. And thank you. Donations, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate each and every one of you. And I hope that you all have a fantastic rest of your night. Ask questions, stay magical, stay inquisitive, and reverse those in the right order that I usually say them. All right. We'll see you next time here on Dark Hour Paranormal. Thank you very much, guys, for being here. I appreciate all of you. Like, share, and subscribe. Oh, yeah, it might help to turn the sound on. What do you guys think? Yeah, that's better. That's a lot better. Ciao.